Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning into our podcast. My name is JoJo Lee, and I am here with my co-host,
Joel Sedano.
And we have guests joining us today from California, and they are members of the Segorte Land Trust. You all want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sorry. Horshatui Kanakuraka Deja Gould. I am a part of the Segorte Land Trust and also a tribal member with the Confederated Villages of Lishan.
Thank you, Deja.
Good day. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. I am the co-founder of the Segorte Land Trust, the first urban indigenous women-led land trust in the country. I'm also the tribal chair for the Confederated Villages of Lishan in the East Bay, and we are in our home territory of Huichin.
Thank you both for joining us today. Our episode is entitled Re-Indigenizing and Rematriating America. And we wanted to start off with land acknowledgments. So our co-host Joel is going to get into that right now.
Hi, everyone. JoJo and I are on the homelands and ancestral territories of the Lenni Lenape, the Munsee Lenape, and the Wappinger people. By acknowledging legacies of displacement, migration, and settlement, we are taking a small first step toward the long and overdue process of healing and repair.
Thank you, Joel. And I know, Karina, you just mentioned where you're calling in from, but I don't know if you wanted to do anything further as far as like a land acknowledgement or anything like that before we get into the discussion.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so we are calling in from our tribal territories. The Confederated Villages of Lishan encompasses 5 Bay Area counties: Alameda, Contra Costa, San Joaquin, Napa, and Solano. And these are our territories that we have been born to. We are born to the mountain, to Yushtak. Our waterway is Lishan, and we are blessed to be in the territory, one of the many territories of Huichin. My daughter is the language carrier, Deja, who's on here with us. And for many years, I was saying it wrong, and I'm trying to recorrect it. But the entire Bay Area says it Huichin now. So we are blessed to be here, and thank you so much for having us here to speak on behalf of our ancestors, our future generations, and those that are here with us today.
Deja, did you have anything to add?
No, I'm grateful to be here and grateful to have grown up in my ancestral homelands and now where I am raising my kids.
Perfect. I guess we should probably say a little something about ourselves too. Like I said, I'm JoJo. I'm also a master's student here at Columbia School of Social Work, and I am also a member of the North Fork Mono tribe of California. It's great to have, fellow Californians in the house, right? Okay, and I don't know, did you want to say anything further, Joel?
Yeah, so again, my name's Joel. Just keep throwing my name around. I'm a MFA student in the School of the Art, focusing on poetry with literary translation. I was born in California, not a California native, but I'm Chicanx with indigenous roots in Western Guanajuato.
Thank you. And the reason we wanted to get this podcast up and running is because we're going to be talking all things Native, all things indigenous, and mostly about the issues that we're facing. This is one of the series that we're going to be doing. And more importantly, like recognizing the work that folks are doing, yes, and also how other people can be a part of that and keep pushing for the agenda of the support for indigenous and Native folks. We just wanted to have a conversation about how this activism started for you in reclaiming your traditional territories and repurposing them from what westernization has done and bringing it back to your traditional ways. And how did you all get started in that?
Okay, so how the story goes. Indians always talk in stories, and so I do that a lot. And then, my kids always tell me I talk too much, and so I want to have Deja's voice heard because my voice is primarily the one that's heard telling these stories. And so thank you all for bringing Deja in, because I think that folks need to hear the next generation that's talking about this work, because the next generation is integral in doing the protection work. And there's this whole thing that happens about probably around Standing Rock when people began talking as Native people. Are we activists or we're protectors? And we really are the protectors of our land that we were born onto. And so it was our responsibility. And I think what I call it is an ancestral calling, that we are supposed to do this. We were basically made extinct through this white paper genocide that continuously happened over many years. And the story of California is never taught in schools. The real story of how colonization happened in our territories. It was much different than what happened on the East Coast where you guys are now, right? So the Mayflower didn't get here, and we didn't have the Pilgrims and all of that stuff. We had the Spanish missionaries and the enslavement of our people from the bottom of California all the way up to a little bit past the East Bay. And those missions really changed our world and our lifeways in a very crazy way, taking the spirituality. And so when we talk about colonization, we have to talk about what happened and the ways that colonization happens and how it attacks their spirituality first. And then it takes women, and it takes our bodies, and it begins to bring violence in different kinds of ways that was never on our lands. And so we are still recovering from not just the Spanish mission period, but the Mexican Rancho period that came right after that, when huge swaths of our land was given away to soldiers that fought in the Spanish-Mexican War. And then right after that, there was the Mexican-American War, where the Treaty of Guadalupe de Hidalgo was signed, and Native people were supposed to get land back to them, but instead, the United States government, true to itself, broke that treaty as well and created laws that made it illegal to be Indian in our own lands. So this is 3 waves, consecutive waves of genocide that had been put on us. Colonization is something that doesn't go away. It's a continuous process, right? So we are still in that process of colonization. And I was in 4th grade in Oakland. We were taught that we didn't exist anymore. I go home to my mom and say that they're saying that we're not here, that we are all dead, but I'm definitely here. And so what does that mean, right?
Yeah, I remember that too, growing up in schools. Like, yeah, these Native folks used to be here, or Indians is what they were saying, they used to be here, and I'm just like, what? So yeah, I remember that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just, even Deja, when she was in 4th grade at Carl Monk, I remember her coming home and having this whole mission project, right? They wanted her to build a mission. And I was pissed as an adult to think about that and to talk about, to write letters to her teacher saying she can create a village of our people, but she will not create a mission that create a genocide on our people. That our people died. It was all of that, trying to re-educate ourselves and re-educate the public as well, right? It's been this process for the last 2.5 decades or more of really trying to do that. But we centered our work around the sacred, around the protection of our ancestors, around praying at Hearst Museum at UC Berkeley for the 9,000 ancestors to come home. It was about us creating this walking education where people from all walks of life came with us and walked the shell mounds. No one in the Bay Area knew what a shell mound was until we began to do the work in the Bay Area. They didn't understand these were our cemeteries, our village places, our points of reference to the world, and that they were all destroyed. And so it was about inviting people to begin to do that work of praying at these shell mounds, walking. So between 1999 and 2005, we did walks in the Bay Area, starting in Vallejo, walking down to San Jose and up to San Francisco. It took 3 weeks walking 18 miles a day, and we stopped at our shell mounds that had been destroyed. And we prayed at these places and asked our ancestors to remember us as we were remembering them. And we stopped at railroad tracks and parking lots and bars and schools and apartment buildings, and underneath all of these places where our shell mounds, our ancestors had been buried for thousands of years. It's that connection to the land. It's the reimagining of what our landscapes look like. It's the telling of our stories again. It's to begin to unearth ourselves in a different kind of way. It's about fighting against developers and city councils and people that would continue to destroy us and think that we're less than human beings. So it's been this educational process. And then in 2011, we took over a site in Vallejo on our Carquinez Strait where our salmon come home. For 109 days, 4.5 months, we took over this land that was going to be destroyed by the city of Vallejo and the Greater Vallejo Recreation District.
I remember that, yeah. Yeah.
And the village site is called Segurite, and that's where we did this process that changed us. And I really believe that being in ceremony for that long changed our DNA. It made us something else. It created a different worldview for us. What Janelle LaRose says, who's our co-founder of Segurite, talks about it, that we went there to save the land and the land saved us. It was really about trying to figure out what we were supposed to do in this world, and it gave us our work. And that's really where the idea of a land trust came from, because as non-federally recognized tribes, we were made homeless in our own homelands. Even though we exist here, we have no right to gather or to be in a place to pray or to do any of our traditional teachings without asking permission from outside sources, people that hold our land. And, this whole private land thing has destroyed our world. And so the land trust is a mechanism in order for us to put indigenous land back into indigenous hands, a way for us to begin to have that connection to the land again, but to also re-engage people that now live in our territories on that land, to begin to bring back language to our land that had been asleep for a long time, to think that for thousands of years, our ancestors heard Chochenyo sung and spoken. And in order for this land to be balanced again, it really needs to have that language in place so that the land begins to hear us again, begins to whisper in our dreams again, begins to tell us what to do. So the Segurite Land Trust was the first urban indigenous women-led land trust in our territory, the Lisjan territory. But it really is a combination of many different indigenous people that come and have lived on our territories through the forced relocation projects of the United States government that brought people off of reservations and into urban settings that have not been able to go home for 3 generations now because they don't have the means to do that. It's a way of engaging people that have settled on our land that want to become allies and accomplices with us. It's a way for us to begin to take care of our waterways again. And it's a way for us to build our spiritual places again and to reimagine our tribe in their sovereign rightful place to do the work that our ancestors have asked us to do.
I can add my own spin on that, my perspective on that. So growing up and having Karina as a mom, me and my siblings were taken to community events, we were taken to protests, we were taken to all of these things that as a little kid you didn't want to go and didn't want to be at.
It's kind of born into it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because I think because of those things, like I resisted a lot. And I was like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do the same work that my mom does when I get older. And this is not going to be me. And here I am.
Right?
But like growing up, like it was really, after, you get older, you realize that these experiences are good experiences. The events that we went to, the protests we went to, they were all for good reasons. And I figured that out later on, and I'm grateful for those experiences now.
Right.
And now I'm the mom that drags my kids to TV.
Right? The next generation.
Yeah. And it's because it's good for them. It's good for them to know about the real world and to know about truth because, like my mom said, we're not taught the truth in school. Right. We're not taught about our true history. We're not taught about even social justice issues or climate change issues or anything like that. So going to these things are important. So the Segurite Land Trust started when I was pregnant with my son. Or the occupation of Segurite happened when I was pregnant with him, and he's seen Segurite grow through the whole process. He's been in it. He's 9 now. He'll be 10 this year. And so when Segurite started, I didn't really even know what to think. It's funny because my mom and Janella have started an organization before called IPOC, and I was just like, yeah, I was younger and I helped out with stuff like that, and so I was like, okay, well, this is cool. This is an organization they started. And then I didn't know what to think of Segurite. But then I started working with Segurite and we started talking about land back. And those were the first conversations of land back, which I think we'll talk about pretty soon. But the idea of us as unfederally recognized tribe trying to get land back was like, something like, okay, yeah, we grew up in urban settings. We grew up at schools where it's all cemented in. There's no access to real land where you actually garden and put your hands in the soil and things like that. So once I started working with Segurite and we did started getting little pieces of land back and I started getting reconnected with the land, I was like, yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what I want for my kids and future generations. And so that's my story with Segurite and how I started.
Yeah, thank you both for giving us that story. You both talked about how, Segurite was trying to get the land back, and both also talked about being not recognized. Can you go into a little bit of how being an unrecognized tribe kind of, I guess, makes these larger barriers to try to get that land back or, to do the work that you all are doing?
Yeah. So, the crazy thing is that there's lots of non-federally recognized tribes in the country, right? In California, it's interesting because along the coast of California where the missions were, there's virtually no federally recognized tribes. And so why is that? We have to ask, right? We're in probably one of the richest places in the world on the long coast of California. What does it mean to be federally recognized or not federally recognized? So I think that's one of the things that people aren't taught in school, right? It's like, what does that mean? Native people are the only people that have to prove who we say we are. You can come from any part of the world and into this country and say that you're Irish or you're Japanese, or you don't have to prove that to anybody. Right. But in order to live in this country as an American Indian, which is the legal term for us because that's what's written in the treaties, then you have to prove who you say you are. It's virtually impossible for California Mission Indians to do that. To prove and go through the hoops that they make you do in order to be re-recognized by the federal government. Yeah. And if you're recognized, then that means that the federal government has to give you a land base. They're supposed to provide you with education opportunities, infrastructure, medical stuff. Now, that doesn't mean that they do a great job. You can go to reservations where people are over 100 miles from hospital facilities, where their housing is dilapidated, where there is no running water or electricity still. In America today, on reservations, people have no access to fresh water in their homes.
I tell Howell that about my cousins, the Dunlap Monos. They still use outhouses. There's no indoor plumbing. You can see through the wall and the roof outside. Like it's here and it's in California. Like, let's be clear.
Yeah, let's be for that. So federal recognition doesn't mean a lot. That's what they're supposed to do, the minimum, right? The minimum.
Mm-hmm.
For non-federally recognized tribes, we don't have a land base. And really, that's what the problem is if you have a land base, it allows you to have your roundhouse ceremonies. It allows you to live in community again. It allows you to organically have language and to do those kinds of things that you should do. In an urban setting, it's almost impossible because everyone is spread out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we did this interesting thing with looking at just Alameda County. And Alameda County itself has like 425,000 square miles, right, of land, right, or acres. It's acres. 425,000 acres of land. Wow. Ohlone people or Lishan people own none of that land. Wow. So in just one of our counties that we take care of, right, there is virtually nowhere for us to be. We're still trying to figure out how to be in our own lands. So there are tribes that have been trying to be federally recognized. And just to be honest, these old archaeologists and anthropologists really screwed us over. Yeah. They wrote things that said that we didn't exist anymore. Yes. They wrote things to the federal government. And even though there was government-to-government relationships with California tribes, including ours, because we are descendant of the Verona Band of Mission Indians, that up until the 1920s, there was government-to-government relations. There was this man named Dorrington in the Bureau of Indian Affairs who was asked by Washington to give them a dollar amount for land to be purchased for the homeless Indians in this territory. And he refused to answer their letters. And finally, they sent him a telegram saying that if he did not answer, they would ask him to come to D.C. to answer. He was an alcoholic, and he quickly penned a letter that said, for all intents and purposes, we were extinct, and there was no money needed to purchase land for the homeless Indians in this area. Wow. And there was nothing that they did. It needed to be an act of Congress in order for us to not exist anymore. They never did anything in Congress, but because he wrote that letter, they stopped having government-to-government relationships with our people. And since that time, there have been many different tribes within our territory that have broken off to create their own groupings. And I'd like to tell people, there was never one overarching tribe in our territories ever in history or ever since time began. And so I think that there are some people that are trying to do that process of federal recognition. But in my lifetime, because the process is so long, it takes up to 50 years, if not longer, to get up line to actually even be heard about being federally recognized, that I didn't have the time, that our people were getting too far away from the land and from who we were. And that if we didn't make this leap to re-engage people into the land again, that we would be lost forever. That their plan of extinction would have worked. No. Right. And so that's why we really had to create this land trust, was to do that. This land trust has changed the way that the Bay Area looks at us. People see us again, that Lishan people are here still, that we're spoken about in the present. But there's something else that changed, that Deja talked about. My grandson, Kai, being involved in the whole thing. He's 9 years old. My other grandchildren were born into it as well, right? All the younger ones. Mm-hmm. The first piece of land that was given to us in 250 years is a quarter piece of land in East Oakland on Planting Justice Organic Nursery. And we created the first arbor in our territory in 250 years. Mm-hmm. And that land has changed who we are as human beings. My grandchildren are different on that land. Mm-hmm. That there's a freedom because they know that they belong there. Mm-hmm. Right. That there is this, that my children didn't have growing up in Oakland. Right. But my grandchildren, you could see that inside of them, that this is theirs, that they understand that this is home. That my granddaughter asked for her birthdays to be there. Aww. That my daughter was married in that arbor during COVID. That we have had ceremony there for our relatives that have passed over. Mm-hmm. That this is a reconnection in the deepest way by having land again.
Exactly.
Land is our connection to who we are as human
survival.
beings.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Deja, did you want to add to that question? I'll say the question again of like how being not federally recognized and the barriers you face with that in trying to get land back, like what you noticed or your experience with that.
Yeah, one of the things that I was like, yeah, we do need recognition. We need to be federally recognized because we need to be able to have access to land and all these things and have rights and stuff like that. And then at the same time, you know, we've talked about it and we're like, it is a long process. It's a ridiculously long process. And, you know, what's more important is that we spend time trying to become federally recognized or that we actually get things done on the land, teaching people about reconnecting with the land and learning about our ancestral foods and medicines and bringing language back and protecting our sacred sites. Those things are important. Federal recognition is not the only way for us to be a people and not the only way that we can be with the land. And that's what's most important is for us to be within the land and reconnect with the land and show people those ways. So I'm more grateful. I think I'm more grateful that we're not federally recognized, although I know that there are obvious perks to being federally recognized. But yeah, I don't think it's as important as what we're doing right now.
Right. And I'm glad you said that. And I think that's a good distinction to make because for our listeners who aren't familiar and things like that, like not every tribe is recognized and they look very different from those who are and those who aren't. And they, you know, a lot of people have that assumption that Native people get all this money from the government and all these kinds of things to be able to do all these things, right? So I'm glad that we're able to, you know, have this conversation and you bring that, you know, unique perspective in that no, not everybody does have these things.
Well, thank y'all for sharing that information. One thing that Karina mentioned was the land was saving us, and I think that's such a beautiful concept. And thinking about Segorte and the idea of rematriation, well, how would you define rematriation? And you touched upon it, both of y'all touched upon how colonization was first a spiritual attack and then it attacked women who tend to be very sacred in Native cultures. And the idea of this land trust was to rematriate the land. And how do you define rematriation?
Is it a way for the continuity of your tribe? And like, how does that help you to prepare the next generations as well?
So I'm defining rematriation as Indigenous women work. That rematriation can't happen. Men can't do rematriation work, and this is why. Janelle and I first started talking about the Segorte Land Trust a little while after we left the occupation. We were all having some PTSD after living in community for 4.5 months, and then started talking about what does it look like to do this, because we didn't know what a land trust was. It was actually our good friend Beth Rose Middleton, who is a professor at UC Davis, who invited me to a meeting in Southern California to go to meet other Native land trusts or meet Native land trusts. We weren't a land trust at the time. And I had no idea what it was, but I went. And when I went there, it was a very small handful of Native tribes, both federally and non-federally recognized tribes, that were actively buying back their own land, buying back their sacred sites, working through cultural easements to have access, leasing an acre of land just to have a place to tell their own stories. And I began to imagine that this was something that we could do at home. And I'm thankful that Beth Rose invited me to do this work. But as I sat in that room for those couple of days, I saw around me, they were almost all men that were running these land trusts. And I met this guy. His name is Dune Lankard. He saved like 140,000 acres of his traditional territory in Alaska after the Valdez spill, the oil spill. And we were having lunch one day, and I asked Dune, I said, "Hey, Dune, is this a boys' club?" Because really, there was just guys, right? And I was like, and so he laughed and he said, "Yeah, kind of, but not just native land trusts, but all land trusts." And then I began to think, I was like, men are holding land, but what have men done to this world? And how does that correlate to what has happened to women's bodies?
Exactly.
And the raping of our land, the stealing of our spirituality, the dealing of our connection, and how that has continuously happened to Indigenous women and continues today as we're looking at MMIW happening, as we know that the continuation of seeing us as with no value.
Right.
But what does that mean for us? And Janelle and I started talking about how it's important, and through ceremony and talking to medicine people about the importance of women at this particular time in the world to take our rightful place to bring balance back into the world. As we're looking at climate disaster, as we're looking at wars, as we're looking at this continuous extraction economy, what does it look like? So rematriation is different than repatriation. Rematriation is about bringing balance back into our lands. We found this one quote from Stephen Newcomb that we've been using, and we really like it. And it says, "By rematriation, I mean to restore a living culture to its rightful place on Mother Earth, or to restore a people to a spiritual way of life in sacred relationship with their ancestral lands without external interference."
Yeah.
As a concept, rematriation acknowledges that our ancestors lived in spiritual relationship with our lands for thousands of years, and that we have a sacred duty to maintain that relationship for the benefit of future generations.
Yeah, I love that.
I think that is the closest that we can come. But as we begin to talk about the Segurite Land Trust as it being an urban Indigenous women-led land trust, what that meant was, how do we as women bring that balance back into the land? How do we as women have songs for the waters and for our medicines and for our basket making materials? How are we the first teachers of our children? But this does not mean that we leave out our sons and uncles and brothers, but that we bring them in, because during colonization, they lost their original teachings as well. They had to be able to fit into that colonization, and then so they lost their spiritual way. And so how do we come back to that? How do we work with people that have always been a part of our community, our two-spirit, non-binary relatives, and to include them in the rematriation process because they have always been with us?
Right.
How do we continue to do this work of bringing medicine back to our lands in those kinds of ways? How do we hold those ceremonies? Because in our way, as matriarchal societies here, it was our responsibility as the women to call the ceremonies, to ensure that people were getting the firewood, to give them the jobs of doing that. And so to bring that balance back into there, to remember to see each other as human beings again. And so Segurite is really about trying to find out how to be human beings and what is our relationship to the lands and to the waters, but not just as Indigenous people. It is also, as an urban area, it is the responsibility of settlers to learn about the waterways and the land. It is their responsibility as well to take care of these lands that they have begun to call home. It is their responsibility to work with First Nation peoples on whose lands they're on in order to do the work of rematriation. When we talk about land back, and we will talk about any Native scholar that's out there talking about it, we're talking about all land back. And what does that mean?
Yeah.
When people begin to freak out about what does it mean to have all land back,
Right.
it means to give it back.
Right.
It means for us to come back into right relationship that is all living. And I think that, as Native people, our spiritual practices are much different than the religions around, is that we do not see ourselves above the land in a way of dominion, but that we were made of it and are a part of the natural creation of all things. And so rematriation is to remind ourselves about that, is to bring us back into doing that. But also our ancestral teachings of feeding people, of making sure people are sheltered, are making sure people are safe, creating hamekas that are touchstones in our communities where people from all walks of life will have those places to be. And so it's really given us a way of standing in our sovereignty on our lands, talking about rematriation, giving Indigenous women voice, and being able to bring our relatives from all walks of life, from all intersections, an opportunity to be in a human being again.
Right. Well, thank you. I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Deja, or we can ask the next question to you, which would be the last question, really.
I think that was
okay.
I think that was very well played.
Okay. So the next question, which is the last question, and you both can answer, but I will start with you, Deja. Like the idea of the giving land back, which Karina touched on, and you touched on, versus like land acknowledgement, and not necessarily in a conflicting relationship, but there's a lot of these land acknowledgements happening around the world or the country that are great, right? But they're kind of like empty in that same sense. Like, okay, you're acknowledging these people, but what are you doing for these people? So the question is, how can these people be, I guess, better allies who are trying to, okay, we're going to acknowledge this and also work towards this land back movement as well?
So I feel like we've talked about land acknowledgements like very thoroughly within Segorite, because as you can imagine, people have reached out. When people started doing land acknowledgements, people were reaching out to us, and I imagine other tribes as well, and like, we want to do a land acknowledgement at the start of our meetings or whatever. Can you send us one? Exactly. Yeah. Or can we send you one and you look it over and approve it or whatever? Right. And so one thing that we had talked about were a couple of organizations were like, yeah, you send us what you have, we'll look it over, but also what are the action items that are going to go with this land acknowledgement? Right. What are you going to do also, because land acknowledgement can be just very empty, like you said, with nothing behind it. So what are the things that you are also going to do as an organization to help support the Indigenous people of wherever you are, on whichever land you stand? So that's something we like to do when we're talking about land acknowledgements with people, is getting together an action item list, basically, and how they can tell whoever their audience is how they can support us as Indigenous people or whoever's land they're on at that point in time. And not only that, is when we go and do land acknowledgements at different places, we also mention, we're here, we are telling you where you're at, and also you can do this to help support us in buying land back, just supporting our work in general by donating to our trust and helping in many different ways, because it's not always just about money. It's also different resources. Right. As far as helping with our website, tech stuff, coming and volunteering on the land, and those people reconnecting with the land themselves, and just donating different supplies to us that we might need. We've been going to the Run for Salmon ceremony every year, and somebody donated a kayak to us so that we could be on the water. So it's a whole bunch of different things. And so we want to make sure that when people do land acknowledgements, that they're not empty, that we're not just giving people generic things to say about us, where it's just, as my mom puts it, a check off box.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Thank you for that. Karina, did you want to add
everything?
No, I think that Deja covered it. Yeah, that's it. Have a list of things that you can do, and have a living document, is what we like to say. Right. Is that it has to change. Otherwise, we say it in rote and it means nothing. Right. It's just words coming out of our mouth.
And like, let's say for us, for like institutions, right? Like universities. I know UC Berkeley have asked y'all about land acknowledgments. What's the advice to give them if they're trying to actually honor the people whose land that they're built on? Is it to work together, collaborate, do something rather than just saying, here we are?
It's funny because on Instagram, I just posted a story that said academia is like, what can we do to decolonize? And then everyone's like, land back. And then academia is like, creates a dean of decolonization position. And I'm just like, oh, I was laughing for like a good 2 minutes, and then I started to cry because I'm like, that's exactly what happens.
Institutions can do exactly that, land back. The universities across the country hold more land than most folks. And so, yes, land back, that's one. How about free education to tribal people from that territory? How about giving access to our language notes without having to create relationships like that? How about giving us a plot of land to rebury our ancestors that you're hoarding away? How about returning all of our ancestral goods? How about creating a place where we can learn and educate each other? And so there are multiple ways that the university can help to do that. So I think that nobody has come forward to do any of those things yet. Land acknowledgement is the first thing that they're trying to do. But I think that within each department that there's possibilities. And so in the UC Berkeley, there's a media center that was created recently, and they're paying Shumi tax as a part of their annual budget.
Oh, that's good.
And so that's a way that they do land acknowledgement and then put their money forward. So I think that there's ways that institutions are beginning to try to do things. And so I hope that it grows. But yeah, I think ultimately land back is the way to go.
Then the drop mic.
Right. Y'all heard it. Y'all heard it here.
Right. Well, we thank you both so much for the work that you're doing and the time that you've given us today. It's truly appreciated. And we hope that our conversation with you all can help others and, participating in these efforts, right? So kind of like last remarks, do you all have a social media or anything like that where people can go and follow, or, your website you want to mention that they can see how to get involved?
Yeah, I can say on Instagram, Facebook, it's Sigorte Land Trust. You could just look that up and it'll come right up. And our website is sigortelandtrust.org. For Sigorte, if you wanted to look at just tribal, it's Confederated Villages of Lashawn, or villagesoflashawn.org, and Villages of Lashawn on Instagram too. Yeah, we post about different pieces of land that we're tending to throughout the week because we have a land team crew, different workshops that we do. We're hoping that, I think we all been praying that COVID would just go away for the last 2 years, because pre-COVID we had constant volunteers on the land. We had work days where people can come and be with the land, and people really appreciated that. People are eager to get on the land and reconnect in some type of way. And it's really sad that because of COVID, people can't do those types of things in the same way. So we're hoping to get volunteers back on the land really soon. And so volunteering would help us out a whole lot too, because, we have to keep tending to the land. We, that she's calling for us to help heal her. And so I thank you all for allowing us to be here and listening to us and inviting us.
Thank you. It was great. Karina, you have anything to add or closing remarks?
Thank you so much for inviting us to be here today. Like Deja said, come look at our website. Our website is not stale. It is forever moving, gets updated once or twice a month. And so there's always new things that are happening there. Also, we are involved in protecting our oldest shell mound along the West Coast, called the West Berkeley Shell Mound. And you can go to shellmound.org to find out the history and the work that we're doing there. We have a rematriation fund, so anybody in the country can give to us to buy back land. And then also for people that are local, you can pay Shumi, which in our language means a gift. And so we look forward to working with other folks, and we collaborate with other non-federally recognized tribes to create land trusts in their own territories so that they can begin to do the work of rematriation.
That's great, honestly. And we'll also post like the links that you've mentioned, Deja and Karina. We'll post those links to our flyer for this podcast and things like that as well. And again, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we look forward to, doing more work with y'all in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations on your first podcast.
Yeah.